Let's bring in David Des Roches. He's in Doha. He's the former director of Arabian Peninsula policy at the U.S. Department of Defense. David, very interesting that you're actually in the Gulf, because usually we talk to you when you're in the United States. Have you ever known, since your days at the Department of Defense, the Gulf to be in such a collective crisis?
They're in a physical security crisis, but it's kind of unusual. Normally they kind of view themselves as the people who mediate between and conduct business and basically have figured out how to live with Iran, and they represent Iranian concerns and interests and their concerns about Iran to the United States, usually with the sort of friendly, like, we understand these people, you may not. Here, they're angry with Iran because they did not participate in the U.S.-Israel attack. They denied access, basing, and overflight in the initial attacks, which is pretty much what Iran asked for. And then they got, the United Arab Emirates has had more missiles fired at it than Israel. So they regard it as a betrayal. And in talking with people, senior people in an unofficial capacity, they basically said, we're not going to forget this.
But many of these Gulf countries are saying they haven't allowed American fighter jets or any hardware to operate out of their territory to attack Iran. I mean, what's the truth here?
That's right.
Because why is Iran attacking if that's the case?
Many of these countries say that even after they've been attacked, they haven't allowed for access, spacing, and overflight for Iran operations. And so they basically view it as Iran, a couple things. There's three motives that you hear here. One is that there's an alternate version of Islam here, which is more successful, more glamorous. Usually when we do this, we talk about Dubai, which is, a global social capital that was just a sandspit 30 years ago. And so they have to show their own Iranian people that this is not sustainable, that this can be destroyed, because it's just too embarrassing for the regime to have an alternate development that's so successful. The second reason is they just want to show that they're the boss in the region and let these countries know that even if generals call them Little Sparta, or if we rely on them, that their security is ultimately up to the Iranians, so they need to deal with Iran rather than with the United States or other outside countries. And then the third factor is, I think, particularly in the case of the UAE and Bahrain, the fact that they've normalized relations with Israel. And I think that there's a strong desire to punish countries that have done that.
For those Gulf countries, it's about their defense, but for the outside world, it's also about their energy supplies to the rest of the world. If the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed because of threats by the IRGC to attack any ships in that waterway, Emmanuel Macron says there's going to be a collective defensive operation to keep the strait open. Do you see that as being viable?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's really remarkable. You had the Iranian foreign minister tweeting out that sinking a warship in time of war was an atrocity at the exact same time that his government is firing on neutral civilian tankers in international waters. I mean, neutral civilian tankers. What we've seen is, yesterday, markets reflect what they think is going to happen, and there was a fear-based price spike yesterday. When you look at the live tracking of ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, there's not much going. But you see this unusual phenomena where ships are on one side of the strait and then they disappear and then they reappear on the other side of the strait. So that indicates to me that ships are turning off their automatic signaling, which is also what Iran uses for targeting, because their radars have mostly been destroyed. And then they turn it back on when they've transited the strait. So I think that a European contribution to policing the international waterways and keep them open for international commerce will be welcome. And given the degradation of the Iranian air defenses and their offensive capabilities, I think that it is reasonable to expect that we will resume near normal energy activities and other activities shipping there. But the expense will be increased a little bit, and I think that the price of oil may be up around. I think it'll settle around $85 a barrel.
David, how do you think Donald Trump is going to achieve his aim of making sure that Iran never presents a threat to the outside world again. That seems to be very much part of his aim. Is that achievable?
It is, but it requires vigilance. And, the Israelis kind of look at this with regard to Lebanon, and they use the phrase mowing the grass, which what that means, you can't leave the grass alone for 6 months, and you basically set yourself a lifetime mission there. I think that a lifetime or an extended period of vigilance and a willingness to basically strike Iran if there's a facility that looks like it's going to be a new nuclear facility or ballistic missile, that is possible. It's going to be a much more easy after Iran has attacked all of the countries to its west and north, from Turkmenistan they haven't attacked, but every other country around them they've attacked, to include Turkey. So it'll be easier because I think we'll find more collaborative cooperation against a rearmed, revitalized, threatening Iran. But it's certainly not going to be without cost and without effort.
The thing is, it's very, very difficult to foresee the eventual outcome, isn't it? He keeps referring to Venezuela. That seems to have gone so smoothly because the government is still in place, but is more compliant. At the end of the day, to achieve that compliance in Iran, with its decades-long philosophy of how it exists and why it exists, that might be too difficult to achieve. It might actually be easier to cause a collapse of the entire government. But if that happens, the country could become just a land of complete chaos. Yeah,
I mean, this is contrary to, President Trump presents himself in a very bombastic and aggressive manner, and it's hard to deal with. But when you look at his actual actions in regime change, it's a very light-handed. I mean, the person running Venezuela now was interchangeable with the former Venezuelan president who's in jail in the time of Chavez. I think that President Trump honestly believes in his heart of hearts that regime change is not something that can be imposed from outside. But if he removes the military threat and keeps the economic pressure on, which is his preferred mode of power, that regime change will come from within. And that may only give us 80% of what we want, but it'll be more lasting, and that's a win. I think that he probably believes that had there not been the massacre of protesters in January by the security forces, many of whom are now being targeted, and that's part of the expansion of targets that Hedgeset talks about, that the regime would have fallen in January. So I'm not sure if he's right about that, but he has a surprisingly light touch when it comes to the actual governance of countries that he's called out and taken action against.
David Des Roches, thank you for the analysis, as always.